next, and I'm going to go back and share again now that we're done with introductions. Okay. So Sean is going to take it from here. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so before I go into the informational video, which we've made for the project, I just wanted to show everyone a map, of course, of the historic districts in Oregon City, Conemaugh in green and McLoughlin in that purplish pink color, just so that everybody knows what we're talking about. I assume that everybody who is present already is somewhat familiar with this, but just to give everybody a little bit of context. Currently speaking, as the video will explain, all buildings are regulated the same way in Conemaugh, but in McLoughlin it is dependent on whether they are designated or non-designated. But I will, was there another slide that I needed to go over, Kelly, before the video? I didn't think so. Okay, I'll share my screen and show everyone a quick project background video. Welcome to a brief overview of Oregon City's Compatible Change Project, ensuring compatibility in our historic districts. There are two types of historic districts in Oregon City: the Conemaugh National Register District and the McLoughlin Local Conservation District. The regulation of structures is different in each district. In Conemaugh, all structures are subject to the same historic review process. In the event of new construction, demolition, addition, or exterior alteration, the action must gain approval through the Historic Review Board. Wait, the Historic Review Board? The Historic Review Board, or HRB, is made up of 5 members from the community: 1 resident from Conemaugh, 1 from McLoughlin, 1 member at large, 1 architect experienced in historic preservation, and 1 member from the Chamber of Commerce. The HRB reviews structures for compatibility, makes recommendations to the City Commission, and considers historical designations and demolitions. Okay, back to the districts. In McLoughlin, as opposed to Conemaugh, structures are regulated differently based on whether they are designated or non-designated. Designation refers to the formal consideration of a site or structure as a historic resource. In McLoughlin, only 35% of structures are designated. Designated structures are treated the same way as those in Conemaugh, requiring HRB review for the same actions. For all the other 65% of structures, the non-designated ones, exterior additions or alterations are not subject to HRB review, unless those changes reach a certain threshold. If the threshold is passed, the action is considered new construction and is subject to HRB review. There are currently 2 thresholds. The first includes the construction of any new separate structure larger than 200 square feet. The second is any addition that is 30% or more in area of the original structure, whether individual or cumulative. The problem is that that threshold based on area is not well defined in city code. As a result, it can be interpreted differently, leading to significant additions or alterations to those structures without technically crossing that threshold for HRB review. The second part of the Compatible Change project involves public improvements. Public improvements are any improvements in the public realm, like streets or sidewalks, parks, trails, or traffic signals. Public improvements are reviewed the same way in both districts. All major public improvements require HRB review. The problem in this case is that in city code, major public improvements is defined broadly. As a result, All improvements in the public realm can be interpreted to require HRB review. These can include significant streetscape improvement projects to the installation of new park benches. So the main question that this project seeks to answer is, what changes are needed to help clarify these problems while ensuring continued compatible change in our historic districts? What do you think? As part of this project, we are looking at the approaches used by other cities in Oregon with their own historic districts in order to create recommendations for changes to our city code. We're seeking your input on the goals we should achieve with these changes so that you can help affect the project outcome. All right, so that was just a basic project overview, and I was going to pause really quickly to see if anybody had any questions before I move on. All right, Kelly, if you could share your screen again so that I could go over the public engagement process and just general overview of the project thus far.
Yep. Sorry, I moved ahead myself. There we go.
No problem. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of where we are in the process. We kind of started with our considerations of other approaches of different cities in Oregon in about September of last year. And in around October, started interviews with individual stakeholders. We had a focus group for public improvements with city staff, and we've been giving presentations and having meetings with neighborhood associations. We also had an online poll for the assessment criteria and the goals that we were trying to achieve with the project webpage, as well as utilizing social media and trail news. The project mailer, of course, was for the virtual open house now. And after this open house, which will be open through the end of February, asynchronously, so people will be able to get some information and answer the questions that you all are answering tonight via survey through the end of February. There will be an HRB work session. And then, of course, we'll move into the City Commission work session and then the actual legislative code amendment process sometime in March, or I'm assuming potentially April, but we'll see. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. All right, so this is just a quick collaborative thing that I wanted everyone to be able to do. I'm going to share a link real quick and then share my screen. In the chat box, there is a link for a Jamboard, which is just a little whiteboard, a little virtual whiteboard for us to collaborate on. And this is relatively easy to use. If you just hit the sticky note button underneath the arrow on the left side there, it'll give you an option to make yourself a sticky note. And what we're asking is what compatibility means to you, whether you just want to define it kind of broadly, like, this here capable of existing together in harmony as in reference to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, or in the context of historic preservation specifically. And if you don't feel comfortable using the Jamboard itself, feel free to add some of your ideas in the chat or raise your hand to say out loud.
Sean, can you go over that again, how to start that? Do we click on that link that you showed there for a minute?
Yeah, click on that that link.
Can you put it back up?
It's in the chat.
It's in. It should be in your chat function in Zoom.
Okay, there we go. Sorry.
Yeah. No
Does
problem.
everybody see the chat box? And Sean, when I opened it up, it said I have view only privileges. I don't know if that's happening for everyone.
Let me. There we go. Everybody should be an editor now. Thank you for that.
Right. So I'll share something just to kick off the discussion. I want to acknowledge that compatibility it's kind of easier for, at least for me, and I think probably for a lot of people, to really identify what's not compatible. So when you see something, you can say, yeah, that's definitely not it, but it's hard to define what it is. One of those things that you kind of know it when you see it. But one thing that's in our design guidelines that I always like to go back to is a statement that non-historic structures and new construction in the district is not historic, and it shouldn't try to be. It says, it is not historic, nor shall it attempt to be historic, but rather to stand side by side with existing historic structures in a respectful manner. And so incompatibility might mean different things in different places. So when you all think of Kanema or McLoughlin, what do you think? And if anyone wants to type in the chat box or just call out loud, then Sean can make a post-it.
I'll call out loud because I'll just type forever and you'll be sorry. What I think about is historic structures with uniqueness. Each structure has their own uniqueness, or vernacular, some of them, but that's what I find really interesting in those older neighborhoods. And it's what I find interesting in some of the neighborhoods in Berkeley Hills.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Get that on there. See, somebody's added does not stand out from the whole or distract from the whole. And somebody just added human-centered design. And I see Karen's hand raised. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I tend to be rather techie, but this is new to me. This is something I've expressed very much to Kelly. Kanema and McLoughlin neighborhoods are different. I'm an historian. I focus on Oregon City. Each neighborhood evolved differently, and they are historic, but they are also dynamic. And I really think we need to allow for something that isn't locked in someone's mind as the only historic view you have of that neighborhood or area. And
Thank you for sharing that. So just making sure that I got what your intention was down properly, not locked into a specific mindset or view as to what is specifically historic for each of those neighborhoods. Is that correct?
correct.
This is Ron Beislein. I think it has to do with harmony of a well-matched characteristics of the buildings around. And I think in the policies we have, they do go into quite a bit of detail into those characteristics. But interpretation is what I see different. And some boards differ over time than previous boards on what is really characteristic and well matched.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Ron. All right. Does anybody have anything else to add to that? Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for humoring me with this. I wanted it just to be a quick opportunity to do some community building and to look and see just kind of, the word itself is used very, very regularly in preservation. And yet a lot of people interpret it, very specifically when they consider things like form and massing of buildings, and then others interpret it in different ways. So I just kind of wanted to explore that as kind of a conversation starter at the beginning of our open house.
Sean?
Yeah.
I couldn't get to my unmute button quick enough. I was over on that other screen.
No problem. Sorry, Mike. What would you like to add?
Well, no, just there's a comment there. It's minimized now to where I can barely see it, but somebody made a comment that you know what it is when you see it. and to me, I think there's a great example of compatibility and non-compatibility. In your mind, stand with me in the middle of 8th Street out in front of the library. And when you look at what was done on that project, they did an amazing job, I think, of being compatible with the old Carnegie building without trying to make it look, without trying to make it look old, but it's very much compatible with it. And then as you're standing there in the street, turn around and look at that church building and the addition that was done to that. And that's not compatible. Some architect should be drawn and quartered over that. It doesn't speak to the neighborhood. It doesn't speak to the original building. So that's just a long way of saying I like that comment that you know it when you see it. That doesn't make it easy to plan for, but it's one of those words that's hard to put a definition to.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. All right, and it looks like Denise has her hand raised.
Yep, I'm sorry. I double booked tonight as usual.
No problem. Thank you for being here.
Representing Oregon City on something to do with Metro. So I heard most of what people said. So I will also add Sean and I have talked extensively about this, as well as some other members of the McLoughlin neighborhood. So I want to be very clear that I'm representing myself. Those of you that know me know that I live in a historic house. I bought it on purpose, and I'm also a historian as well. I have a master's degree in that. But one of the things I want to emphasize is that having worked on the design guidelines that we currently have, and I hope to be working on I understand Grant wants to do some revisions. I look at this from the standpoint of how new development or additions, such as we've been talking about, fall into that. So it's basically to enhance the visual character of the districts by constructing harmonious designs that reflect and support the character. I'm reading directly from the intro to the design guidelines. We want to protect property values, ways of life, owners, and community investment in the districts. And even though McLoughlin is a conservation district, it does, as Karen stated, have its own character. We have a lot of vernacular dwellings in this neighborhood. They are fantastic in their own right. But what I am looking for as a property owner, as a person who has significantly invested in this district, is compatibility. And Mike, to give you some props, the neighborhood worked long and hard to make the library what it came out to be, because that's not what it started out as. And I think a lot of the suggestions from our community members really made that project much better. And we also had some very astute architects who understood the character and value that building brought and meant to people in this community. And that makes a lot of difference when you're dealing with an institutional building of that sort. So I am not looking to add additional burdens. I'm looking for continuity and compatibility. And so when you start adding on to a building and it becomes a completely different building, I think that there is some amount of review that should be looked at. And it should, you know, be in harmony and be compatible. I know that many of you could go to many places in our community where you kind of, not the historic districts, but even in the newer developments, and think, huh, you know, what were they, you know, and it's a matter of taste. What were they thinking? The buildings today, the way I like to describe them, are designed from the inside out rather than outside in. So when you look at things that are, you know, historic, even the mid-century modern buildings, you look at the placement of the windows, you look at the placement of the doors, there's a whole Pythagorean theory that is evident in that design. You don't have all these jiggy-jaggedy roof lines, you don't have doors over here, windows up here, don't have big blank walls. They were looking at the design of how it all fit together in harmony. And so I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I don't disagree with anything that you said, Mike, but you know, the Historic Review Board at the time they reviewed Atkinson Memorial, they did the best job they could with what they had to deal with. And, you know, it may not stand the test of time.
Thank you for sharing that, Denise. Karen, did you have something else to add, or is your hand raised from when it was raised
Yep.
previously?
No, I'm actually chiming in a little bit on Denise and Mike. Thank you, Denise. I was on the library board and I was never convinced that expanding on site was the right answer until the architect came up with the perfect setting for our little jewel of our Carnegie Library. I am thrilled with it. And Mike, I testified against that Atkinson expansion multiple times. That was National Historic Properties guidance, that you have to differentiate from the original building, not make it look like a part of the building. This is where standards create problems. And I'm still not happy, but I got a chuckle because the architect said that he was using features from the Ermitinger house, which, oh, by the way, was never there originally. It was down on the waterfront. And everything he cited as an historic guide for that extension wasn't originally part of the McLoughlin neighborhood. A lot of things got moved up from downtown from earlier eras. So that's why I sometimes get leery about guidance and standards. And
Karen is correct. The original design for that building was an absolute mimic of the original Atkinson, and SHPO and the National Park Service said no. They did not want it to be a mirror image of the original building. They just said no. And I understand that. I mean, I've dealt with that, dealt with the register for many, many years, and I understand why they said no. It probably, Mike would have loved it, but you wouldn't have been able to differentiate between the new and the old. And that was kind of where the feds were coming from.
No, that isn't, and that isn't what I meant. A comment that I put on the sticky board thing said that it needs to be compatible, but not be fake old. I wasn't saying that it should have been a mirror image. I don't think I would have liked that any more than what it ended up being. But
no, that's what the architect had proposed.
Yeah, well, I don't like that either. But I mean, I think to me that new part. Well, and I apologize for driving us into the ditch on that one thing. Well, I'll just leave it there. I wouldn't like a mirror image, and I wouldn't like what's there. I don't like it, but I do like the library. And Denise, I know there was hours and hours and hours spent by a lot of different people to make that turn out the way it did. And that to me it honors the original building without trying to imitate.
Great, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for the contextual explanation, Denise, and your opinions as well, Karen. Of course, we could talk about that specifically for quite some time, and I know we've got quite a bit to go through as far as the alternatives that we're considering. So I'll hand this over to Kelly to take it from here.
Thanks, Sean. And thanks for that discussion. I always learn something when I talk with you all. So thanks. And I want to just point out too that the buildings that we were talking about in just now are historic structures that were being added to. And what we're talking about are in this meeting are the non-designated structures that are being added to in the district. So it's a little bit different, but compatibility still applies, right? So as you saw in the video that Sean shared, the current threshold when someone has a non-designated structure in McLoughlin and they want to build an addition to it, if that addition is 30% or more of the original square footage, it triggers that historic review, and then that they need to meet historic design guidelines. If that threshold is not reached, then there is no guidelines need to be met and no review occurs. So with that, I want to share, we have 5 different kind of alternatives that we have come up with your help and with our research on other jurisdictions. So, we would like to share those with you. Get your feedback on them. So we have little surveys built into this open house. So after I share each one, you'll be able to take a survey about that alternative. And then at the end, we're going to ask you what are your favorite 2 alternatives. And it's a little bit, we're going into the weeds here. So bear with me. Please let me know if anything is just not clear at all.
Can I ask you a clarifying question before you start that? One of the things I strongly feel needs to be changed is that we need to not be using the building department definition of what a remodel is. It needs to be more restrictive in the historic section of the code. You should be able to tear down an entire building, build it back, and call that a remodel. That is not a remodel in my mind. So I hope we talk about that as well, because that's a problem.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So here's our list of all of our alternatives. So I'm going to go one by one and we'll ask you a little poll question for each of these slides. So our alternative 1A is keeping status quo, but with an improved definition in our code. So that would mean we're keeping the 30% where it is, and we're keeping that 200 square feet detached structure. And the improved definition would be to define the floor area. When we're talking about 30% floor area, we're only looking at above ground finished space. So if the house has a finished basement, if it has attic space that's not finished, if it has a garage that's attached, as many non-designated structures do, then that will not be counted in the square footage. So the way this works is, you have let's just say it's a pretty large home, so 2,000 square feet, 30% is 600 square feet. So if they were building an addition 600 square feet or greater, then it would be reviewed. If the addition were less than 600 square feet, no guidelines apply, no review occurs. And Denise, to speak to your point, the new definition would capture both new construction and reconstruction when the floor area is completely eliminated and then rebuilt. So we would create our own definition of that in the code. So Sean, if you we don't have, I'm sorry. Our polls are going to come in a minute when we talk about the evaluation criteria. I'm going to just walk through the alternatives first. So I apologize for that. So the second alternative is to reduce the percentage in the existing code to 20% with the same improved definition. So we'd just be lowering the 30% to 20%. So your 600 square foot addition on that 2,000 square foot house now becomes 400 square feet. Alternative 2 is to just use a flat square footage. So instead of using a percentage, we just say anything larger than 350 square feet gets reviewed. 350 for residential uses, and then of course we have a lot of non-residential buildings in the district, and we would apply a 1,000 square foot flat square footage for additions to those structures. Alternative 3 is to look at the height. So we would combine 1A or 1B. So we'd still look at any additions, 30% or 20%. But then if there were some work being done on a home that increased the height taller than 25 feet, no matter how big that addition is, it could just be 100 square feet. But if it's going up above 25 feet, then we would review that. Alternative 4 would be a combination of 1A and 2, where we say review is required if the addition is 30% or greater of floor area or 350 square feet, whichever is less. So we have a precedent of using this in our code for other purposes. For example, when we were talking about the size of an accessory dwelling unit, we say 800 square feet or 60% of the primary structure, whichever is less. So this is a slightly more complicated option, but there is precedent for that. So we also, here, those are our 5 alternatives. We considered some other ones that didn't make the cut, and those are reducing the percentage in the existing code to 10%. We rejected that because that could require review for some very small additions, especially on very small structures. And that gets into the realm of treating non-designated structures more like designated structures. And what we heard from a lot of folks that we interviewed was that would be a little bit too burdensome. Adding a type 2 review process, so a staff level review for some of these structures, we rejected that because it would require writing new code for clear and objective standards. These standards would lack the flexibility of design guidelines and be probably difficult to write and very rigid and not allow flexibility for these property owners. It also wouldn't help speed up the process for people. The HRB review is actually fairly quick, and the staff review would not go any quicker. We would still publicly notice those and have public comment period. The third one that we rejected was any addition on the front of a building would be reviewed no matter how large it was, and that was rejected because we thought it can lead to confusion for property owners and for staff to define what is considered an addition on the front. You'd probably have to bring in additions on the side as well that created new front. And then we also heard that all 4 sides of the structure are important, and so we should treat them the same. So we rejected that alternative. So we took the 5 alternatives that made the cut, and we kind of tested them with our evaluation criteria. And so these we shared with you all earlier in the process, and we heard that, you know, these were fairly supported. Everyone kind of agreed these are good goals to have for this project. We want the new code to provide clarity. We want it to be clear and understandable to the public, to property owners and staff. We want to consider city resources. We want to make sure that any new code we create doesn't require additional staff resources that are currently very limited. We wanted to make sure that we didn't overburden any property owners, and we understand that's negative language. We couldn't find a way to rephrase it and keep the same meaning. And so what we're trying to say is that we want to respect the status of the non-designated structures. And lastly, we of course want to maintain historic integrity in the district, and have review thresholds that will accomplish that and ensure compatibility. So the way, what this evaluation looks like when we test all of these alternatives against that criteria, and I don't mean for you all to read this, so please don't try to read it. But we have kind of green for, it does a good job, yellow, no change, orange, it doesn't accomplish the goal very well, and gray, it's debatable or hard to tell. So I'm showing you this kind of snapshot here just to show that there's no clear winner. There's nothing that's green all the way through. And so that's why we're here talking to you, of course, because there is no necessarily right answer, and they're all decent options, and we're trying to find the best one. So I'm going to walk through each one, and now we're going to have the polls after we kind of go through each one. And I see that Denise has a question. Did someone raise their hand?
Yes, I did. I was trying to get off mute. I'm following you so far, but I'm wondering, are there any visuals that you have? I'm trying to imagine in my head a non-residential structure that might have 1,000 square feet added to it. I'm trying to think, okay, the only thing I can think of in Kenema might be where John's Auto Repair would be. McLoughlin,
Yeah, so this would
be a church. We got like a jillion churches in our neighborhood.
Sure. So this would only apply in McLoughlin and Kenema.
Right.
Any addition
No,
gets
that's what I said.
wrapped
I was
up,
trying to think of something that's
yeah.
equivalent that's non-residential. So I wasn't saying it applies in Kenema. I was just trying.
Right.
I'm just wondering, do we have any? Did you do any visual examples? I mean, the one thing that I couldn't do, and I'm sorry, Sean, is I wanted to take him on a little tour of the neighborhood, showing him how with a few tweaks we could have made building X, Y, and Z better. And this is, we were promoting this review, but weren't able to do it because of COVID.
Right. We don't have any visuals of existing buildings in this presentation, but I guess City Hall, or the new High Street building right next to the elevator. If there were ever additions made on those structures, those are non-designated in the district, and so I think there are a lot of commercial structures
like the
that are
US
generally
building,
larger.
the
Sorry?
telephone building over on High Street, or work for the employment office, maybe. I'm just
Right.
in my head think of some buildings that.
Yeah. Okay, so alternative 1A, I'm just going to walk through the evaluation criteria for each one, and then we'll ask you your opinion. So alternative 1A is the status quo, with the clarified definition to make sure we capture those projects that are remodels today. So we think that this alternative provides more clarity, because we're better defining what we mean by floor area. This wouldn't change the amount of staff time needed. That it would be really no change to property owners, and that it would be almost about the same as far as maintaining historic integrity, but of course we'll capture those remodeling projects, and so we'll close a loophole. So this could be green, maybe debatable, or yellow. Sean, go ahead with the poll. So it's okay if you're not sure. You'll get a chance to react again at the end to all the alternatives and let us know what your favorite ones are. We thought this was a good way to get people's opinion in real time.
All right, we're just lacking one response. I was going to give another second before we.
And Sean, I'm not voting on it. Maybe that's why. You only have.
I only have 6 and there should be 7.
Okay. Well, maybe somebody's on the other meeting right now.
Definitely. Well, I'll end it for now, but give them an opportunity to speak up if they'd like to later. All right, so these are the poll results thus far for alternative 1A. And it looks like kind of in the general middle overall for the people present.
Okay. Everyone see those results? All right, I think let's move on to 1B. And Sean, do you have what you need from that?
I do, thank you.
Okay, so alternative 1B, here we go. This would reduce the percentage to 20%. We think that that would provide clarity the same way that the last one would. Could lead to an increase in staff time because they would capture more additions with that lower threshold. I think as far as it overburdening, this is debatable. I think we heard that it could, you know, it would require more projects to go through a review. And then maintaining historic integrity, it would capture more projects that would go to the historic review board. So that one is green. Any questions about this one before the poll? Okay.
All right. A little more polarizing, but similar results on this one as well, with 3 people generally liking and 3 generally disliking.
Okay. So let's move on to alternative 2. I think we're doing okay on time. So alternative 2 is using a flat square footage rather than a percentage, 350 square feet for residential and 1,000 square feet for non-residential. So this would change both the addition and any detached structure as well. We thought that that would actually probably provide a lot of clarity because 350 is 350. We're not arguing about what your original square footage was at all. So this is very clear. It doesn't necessarily change any staff time. It could potentially capture more additions on larger homes. And so that's why the don't overburden is kind of a gray. Maybe it could be you know, that could go a couple different ways, but you know, a larger structure, that 2,000 square foot structure that we used earlier as an example, where the 30% would be a 600 square foot addition. Now they're down to 350. So it would capture more larger structures, and then I think because of that, it would do a good job of maintaining the historic integrity. And Denise raised her hand. Go ahead, Denise.
I just want to say I think that the review of those non-residential ones could have a significant impact on the district. I mean, I'm just thinking of, you know, like the workforce built, not that they have anywhere to go, to tell you the truth, they have no property to expand on, but if they did, or where CenturyLink is, you know, I think those actually need to be looked at even more closely because they're non-residential. They're, you know, obviously things were there that were torn down and they could have a substantial impact. I mean, you weren't here, but Karen was during the time when we were working on the, they wanted to put a cell tower that looked like an industrial structure in the middle of the neighborhood at the CenturyLink building. It was US West then. And it was like, you've got to be kidding me. But they were queuing off the mill. They wanted to make it look like a smokestack. You know, where do you have a smokestack in the middle of a residential district? You generally don't.
Okay, was there another hand raised that I saw?
Yes, Karen's hand is raised.
Okay, chuckling. I have a smokestack fake cell tower next to my apartment complex. So they did manage to build one. But I just all of a sudden had a weird thing cross my mind. One of the things I pointed out to Kelly, these designated, non-designated structures. It's been over 20 years since we've done a survey, and certain buildings have gone over 50 years. That includes the now Providence Willamette Falls Medical Center. So as you're looking at adding to commercial structures and revising, this could get interestingly tricky.
Luckily, it's not in the conservation district, so it would not be reviewed.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just outside of the old Buena Vista. Oh,
Yeah, Buena Vista is not in the conservation district.
Okay, I feel better, but I'm also laughing because I had texted Denise that Mike's Drive-In and the 7-Eleven are now considered historic.
Well, they could be potentially eligible, is what the word is.
So yeah,
Yes.
so the district doesn't stretch to 15th quite there. Whoops. So yeah, it doesn't go over to 15th. It does capture some of the old high school buildings, the school district buildings over there. And so the largest, I'm trying to think of what the largest commercial buildings are in the district. There aren't really a lot of large ones. But I think when you think about 30% of those, that's a pretty big number in some cases. I'm gonna go.
I think a lot of those are along High Street, Kelly. There's some of those. There's, you know, I'm thinking of the service station there at Madison next to Dairy Queen. Dairy Queen would also be included. Going to the street, the mortuary.
So let's take the poll on this one.
All right.
We wait long enough, Mike's house will be potentially eligible.
So this one looks like it has more people liking it, but it's the same amount as the previous alternatives. We just have one person particularly disliking this alternative.
Okay. Great. This is so fascinating. I like doing this, you guys. Thank you. So let's move on to alternative 3. So this one is a combination of using a percentage, as in alternative 1, and then also using this height requirement. So any structure that ends up being taller than 25 feet automatically goes to HRB for review. We thought that it still provided clarity. Height is, a simple number to understand. It probably wouldn't affect city staff time too much. It is debatable whether this would overburden. And then we think that it would probably do a decent job of maintaining historic integrity by capturing the structures that might have a bigger impact with our height. And Denise has raised her hand. Go ahead, Denise.
So from a land use standard, how does this differentiate between what the height requirement is in the district let's say the RC4 zone, excuse me, that's the old 3.5.
Yeah.
Or the R6, because.
Yeah, so the residential zones have a 35-foot height limit.
That's what I thought.
Yep, and then the commercial zone, like along 7th, the mixed use corridor zone has a height limit of 40 feet. So
is there a statement that in there it has something to do with the IOOF hall, the scale in terms of its height? That's what we were kind of looking at to be the benchmark.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's take the poll on this one. Okay.
More people liking this one, possibly because it would do a good job of capturing some potential changes that would have otherwise in an existing code be possible to build without historic review.
So question for you. So if this only deals with the height, it also deals with the size?
Yeah, it would have the percentage.
The 30% and 25?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so
you probably should say that because that was not clear.
Oh, sorry for the lack of clarification. Yeah, so this alternative would be the combination of any structure that any change that would make a structure taller than 25 feet and alternative 1A or 1B. So the 30% or 20%, which is open for debate as to what that percentage is.
Okay. Yeah, and since I didn't have 1A and 1B in front of me, I couldn't say, okay, I was looking like, what is 1A?
Sorry about that.
Should we?
I think, is it okay to keep the results of this vote then? Or is that going to change people's minds?
Well, it's changed my mind because I think I need to look at it. So if you said combination of any change in height, taller than 25 feet, and the numbers, that would have clarified it more than 1A or 1B. That didn't help me.
Yeah, thank you for.
I might change my vote based on that.
For that, yeah, I'm happy to relaunch that.
Denise, do you just want to tell us what your vote would be?
What was it? The first one was love it. One was I like it. The middle one was I don't know.
Oh, do you want to just share the results, Sean?
No, I mean, that's okay. I was thinking of it in my head. I'm not sure that it gets to what my concern is, because I still think 30% is too big.
Okay.
Would you feel the same way at 20%, which is another percentage that would be considered?
Possibly. I'm looking at, so when we met on the 4th of January, I'm looking at my notes that I wrote down at when we had that discussion. And I put down something here, two-pronged approach. I wrote square footage 200% or 10, or square footage of 200 square feet or 10%. I have a question mark next to it. So obviously I didn't finish that thought.
All right. Well, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the last.
Yeah, let's move
alternative.
on. I can't, I think it has, if this goes to further on, it needs to be clarified further.
Yeah, Kelly, I
Okay.
have my hand up with a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Feet don't do a lot for me. The McLoughlin neighborhood, including the 7th Street corridor, were basically 2 stories with possibly an attic and a false front that made it look like they were 3. Does this allow, well, and also the fact that houses were 2 stories plus an attic, does this allow for construction greater than what I would consider 3 stories?
No, 25 feet would be about 2.5 stories.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy with my vote.
Okay. All right. So alternative 4, this would be a combination of the 30% threshold and the flat square footage threshold. So 350 square feet or 1,000 square feet for non-residential. And so we think that this would provide clarity. It would not change staff time requirements, and it probably wouldn't result in much of a difference, except for it would capture some of the larger, it would capture some additions to larger structures probably that wouldn't have been captured otherwise, because there's that minimum 350. And this probably is a little more fair, I guess, when you think about, there might be very large structures and there might be very small structures. So we have the percentage and we have the flat square footage to have a minimum floor. And so we think that would do a good job of maintaining integrity. So let's launch the poll for alternative 4. And this is the last alternative we're going to ask you to vote on.
Did you have a clarifying question, Denise, before I launch that poll? Okay. All right, so these are the results for alternative 4.
Yeah, it looks like people like this one as well, better than others. Okay, so now we might actually have our answer to the next question already, but
The visual helped.
Sorry?
The visual helped.
I appreciate that feedback, Denise.
Thank you. So now, just to wrap this up, a final poll, we want you to now choose your 2 favorite alternatives. So, that may have changed. I think, looking at them all together makes things different. So let us know your top 2. Go ahead with the poll. Sean, please.
One quick question, Kelly.
Oh, yeah.
Could you potentially go back to the slide that you did at the beginning of this, because it actually had some visual elements on the side?
Yes. Okay.
That might help folks gauge what we're considering. Oh, they're not all together.
Oh, they're not all in the same one. Well, that one at least has that.
And yeah, I would just note that alternative 3 is that consideration of a height and a percentage.
I'll just kind of like scroll through them slowly as you have the poll up. How about that?
And this one is multiple choice. So if you could choose your top 2, and of course, if you don't like any of them enough to do that, that's fine. There is an other or I'm not sure option, or you can of course leave it blank. I'm gonna give it one more second. All right, got everybody. Looks like the winner is number 3, which is a combination of height and a percentage. So it would capture any addition that would make, or any change that would make a building taller than 25 feet, and then the consideration of an addition of 20 or 30%, which again is open for conversation.
So does anybody have any thoughts, things that haven't been said already about why you chose the ones that you chose? Go ahead.
Yeah, number 3 was my favorite because it does discuss height. But to me, one thing maybe we haven't thought of is, and to me, I think it would make sense to add in there that anytime any part of a new structure is taller than the existing structure, then that should be reviewed.
Mm.
Rather than saying something arbitrary at 25 feet, if you've got a 1-story structure and somebody wants to put a 2-story addition next to it, or a taller addition than what's already there, that to me ought to be reviewed always.
Any other thoughts?
Well, Mike, that's what got us here.
This is Wendy. I don't see a hand raising option.
Sure. Go ahead.
Reason. Hi. I do like, oops, you can't see me at all. I do like having options. I like the lower standards of the 20%, but I do like the options because, as you know, no cases are the same. So I like to look at, well, that flat rate doesn't make sense, but the percentage makes sense, or the height makes sense. I'm not so sure I like you having the height. I'm not so sure I love having it that specific 25 feet, because there may be situations where something is 1 story, very small 1 story, and they're going up to 24 feet and it's a huge change. So I like the height thing. Not sure I like the flat number of 25. And I wonder if this sort of does it when you have a choice, if we could work volume in there, because that's something you can calculate. Because when we do have, maybe someone's taking the attic and changing it into a full size story, that could capture that. So that's just, I like these that do have the combinations, but maybe those are just some other things to maybe tweak. Thank you.
And we do have to, thanks for the thoughts. We do have to move on to public improvements, and I want to allow time for that. But maybe another minute or so of comments on this.
Oh, let's get to public improvements.
All right. Thank you. All right, speed through here. So major public improvements, as we mentioned before, this is vaguely defined in city code. So that kind of puts us in a position where we almost have to send everything up to the Historic Review Board. So we are recommending to add a few more exemptions into the definition, so that there are many public projects that would then become exempt from any review. And then also to add a staff review for some types of public improvements, and that would be through creating an HRB policy for some public improvements. So here's what we have, and we have some more live poll questions for you for each of these. So here are pictures of all the exceptions that we are proposing to add. So these would not go to the board for review. So Sean will put the poll up and you can kind of choose which ones you agree with should be exceptions, but I'll just kind of list them out real quick. Street trees, bus stop infrastructure, movable street furniture or signage, playground equipment, standard traffic control signage, stormwater planters, parklet installations, bike racks, and tree removal. So go ahead, Sean, with the poll.
Oh, wait, no. No, sorry.
Well, let us know in the poll which ones
It's
you agree with.
It's not so much of a poll.
So let us know which ones you think should be exempt from any review, so the HRB would never look at these. Knowing that there are other
They don't
permits
look
that are
at 'em.
required for these, and
They
there
don't
are
look
other.
at them now. So what is the problem you are trying to solve? Okay, let me just be clear. I know that Public Works doesn't want to do certain things, and I'm being kind about it, but there are certain things that they do that affect the district. So for instance, they wanted to establish playground equipment at Barkley School and at the library park. We did not want plastic furniture because plastic doesn't belong in a historic district. So yes, it got reviewed.
Fair enough, okay.
Not by HRB, but it got reviewed by the staff.
Okay, so maybe some of these belong as staff. Okay, but with this, we're asking, do you want this to be exempt completely? And you're right, Denise, some of these we don't, the HRB does not review now, but we would like, we did review, I think the HRB has reviewed playground equipment in the past. And I think we like to add clarity to the code so that staff in the future knows what they need to do and who needs to review what.
Kelly, they were reviewed because they were both on historic sites. That's why they got reviewed.
Okay.
But, St. John the Apostle, we tried to convince them to put in not plastic playground equipment but they weren't historic.
Okay. Got it.
It looks like Karen has her hand raised.
Well, I'm kind of jumping in with Denise because most of these have other code they have to comply with. And I've had some issues with signage on 7th Street that is grossly oversigned right now and needs to be reviewed. But the parklets, signs, etc., all have other code that would probably prevail.
Yep.
So we just saying that we're not going to apply an historic overlay on making those decisions over other code.
Right. So these are projects that have to go through other permitting processes through the city or the city. So, street trees, we have street tree permits, parklets, we have permits. And these are all like public projects that the city installs ourselves, or we issue a permit for someone else to install in the right of way. So these are what we're only talking about, public improvements and things in the right of way right now.
Do you have a section for it depends?
Well, I think we have, so we're going to have this online open house for the rest of the month. So there will be a space for, more open-ended commentary within that if you want to go through that online version of the open house when we post it tomorrow. Yes,
the reason
Wendy?
I'm asking is that in the East Portland Grand Avenue Historic District, we had Chippo take a look at the issue of stormwater rain gardens. I mean, they are not historic in any way. And what the concern was whether or not they would change the character defining features of that historic district. That would be my concern. I have nothing against them, but depends on where they go. I mean, It really is. We had that debate when we were putting in curb extensions on 7th Street. And would they be compatible, not historically, but from an aesthetic view of the district? And we determined that they were low visual acuity and we said, yes, they could go in there, but the whole 7th Street corridor was reviewed because it was a major public improvement in the district. But again, the tree removal depends on whether it's in, like, if they want to take out a bunch of trees in Barclay Park, that's a whole different story as to some other place.
Well, I think that if I could jump in,
depends.
I think that that's why you would not have that as an exception, because if it depends, you want to look at it, right? And then you can
Exactly,
say,
that's what
"Oh,
I'm
well,
saying.
Well, then don't check it as
I
an
didn't check it.
Okay, I'm not sure. It sounds like, anyway, so my comment was you had tree removal and tree planting together as one item. That is completely opposite. So that should be divided. Because,
So tree removal would be like trees on public property. So
But
we
you
have
have
a
one-
whole city process for that now. And then street trees are, you know, right now we have street tree permits. People get them if they want to remove street trees. And so that doesn't go to the board now. So it would just be keeping that in place.
okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding the poll. You're asking me what I think we should look at or what.
What we should exempt, what should be exempt from
Right.
review.
Okay, and that's not, to me, that's not asking what we do have already. It's asking what I think we should have.
Yep.
But
Yep.
you have removal and planting together as one item on the poll. Those are two completely opposite things.
Okay, I thought you were referring to the third option, which is tree removal, and the fourth option, which is installation or removal of street
Right,
trees.
installation or removal, those are opposite things. They shouldn't be one item. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
I'll hear those coyotes.
Last night, I don't know how I'd feel about them being in a historic district. Unless,
About what?
so I said, I don't know how I feel. We just talked about parklets last night, and I don't know how I would feel about parklets in the 7th Street corridor unless we had some very specific design standards, because even though the stuff downtown is kind of okay, I don't think I'd want them in my neighborhood.
So when Sean, you can share the results, and I think what we'll do with this is, like, we'll see if there wasn't a lot of support for any of these, then we'll look more deeply at it, you know, and do a little bit more outreach on, you know, how to treat these items.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I appreciate the feedback on the polling. It is a little bit limited due to the Zoom environment, unfortunately. Not that that is an excuse. As I said, I appreciate the feedback. It makes us know what to do to be better in the future. But also, yeah, as Kelly mentioned with the online open house, the survey that's attached to that will be open through the end of the month. If you have anything else that you would like to add to it, there will be opportunities for, you know, just open sentences. You can type as much as you'd like to tell us, and we will review and add that to all of the public comments as well as we are working towards these recommendations. So I don't want people to think that if they voted a specific way here, that is the be all end all definition of how they feel necessarily. So don't think that I'm going to take it that way.
Kelly, are we trying to come up with a definition of what a major public improvement is?
I think what we would do is, right now, the only thing what the definition says now is that maintenance and repair is not considered a major public improvement.
No,
And so we would just kind of add to that and say these other things, potentially these other things on this list are also not considered a major public improvement. So yes, we would
Well,
change the definition.
I think you need to add some definition to it. I mean, I would say that, you know, historically, you would look at whether it affects the character defining features of the district. And then there's other things, you know, obviously curb extensions, we were able to use an exemption by saying, well, it promotes public safety, but it's also low visible, its visual acuity is very low, and it's not going to severely, you know, change. And so when they did that, they put the stamp in, so you knew when it was built in the sidewalk. They tried to follow all of those things. I know that when Shelley and Tom were here, they were trying to get the historic looking bike racks in the district, and everybody thought those were great, you know,
Mhm.
the ones that had the bridge that looked really.
Yep.
Stop signs, I think, you know, obviously those are traffic control devices. But, you know, I think TriMet has some different bus stops that they can use. I mean, I would want to look at it because the ones they have, they're very modern and they're pretty darn ugly.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to move to the next one. So we're proposing to add an HRB policy that would allow staff review always for projects on this list. So if you, so we're going to post this list in the poll, and if you agree that it should be a staff review rather than an HRB review, then you can choose it. So that includes any street furniture, street lighting designs that's already been approved by HRB in a project in the past, curb extensions or traffic calming street elements that are similar to designs already approved by HRB. In McLoughlin, any driveway permits or new driveways, if they meet city standards, general city standards for driveways. Any freestanding signs that are made of wood or metal materials. And so that's what we do today. We're just kind of clarifying that. Any new landscaping can be approved by staff, and in Kenema, asphalt berms. And there's a picture of that. If you move your poll over, you can see the asphalt berm in Kenema.
I don't see that.
It's in the middle of the slide. So if you move the poll over to the side, then you'll be able to see that photo.
It looks like Wendy's hand is raised. Was that raised from earlier? Did you have something that you wanted to
Asphalt
add?
berm.
And if not, Karen, do you have something that you would like to add or a clarifying question?
It actually refers back to the prior poll, but also to this one.
Okay.
7th and Washington is the most insanely visually
Clutter.
overwhelming place anybody can drive through. And I realize that is city, county, state, probably national code. But the number of things it tells you what you can and can't do as a driver, advertised businesses, etc. At some point, we really need to clean up that intersection and make a little better sense of it. And again, it's not just historic, but that is just a nutso intersection. I'm actually, yeah, this one isn't bad, but at some point we need to really line all of our codes up and figure out how to simplify things for pedestrians, cars, you name it.
I don't disagree with you, Karen. That intersection is, you know, I can count on my hands every day the number of people that make a left-hand turn onto Washington that it's an illegal turn. So Kelly, on the freestanding signs, I thought it was freestanding made of natural material. So if somebody wanted to build a sign out of brick, they could do that?
Wood or metal. So a brick, I guess with this, then a brick sign, a public, right? This is for public improvements. So if it were a city sign in the right of way, or like in the park, right? The McLoughlin Promenade, right? We just reviewed, the Historic Review Board just reviewed a sign made of plastic in the McLoughlin district. That was
because it's on the National Register, not because it was a sign made out of metal. It's on the National Register, so it requires review. It doesn't matter.
We reviewed it as a major public improvement, actually, because the promenade isn't locally listed. But it's in the district, right? So we reviewed it as a major public improvement.
Yeah,
And so to answer your question about brick, a brick sign then wouldn't fall under the staff review, so then it would go to HRB as well.
well, I think if you're talking about city, the same standards that the district has for signage should apply to the city. If the city decides they want to build a sign out of brick, that's a natural material and it should be allowed.
Okay, so maybe add brick or add natural material to this
Yes,
instead
add
of
natural materials, because that
okay.
the same standard. It's not deviating from one to the other. It's
Okay.
making things equitable, whether it's the city or a private party.
Okay. All right, it looks like maybe it's time to close the poll.
I had to move mine out of the way so that I could see what the heck was going on with the pictures.
I'll
Kelly.
wait on the next one for you. Sorry, Karen, to interrupt you.
Yes, okay, Kelly, I want to add. HRB recently approved a composite sign, don't say plastic,
Okay.
because we're becoming part of the film trail of Oregon, and the state has a specific sign they create that is composite, that is long lasting. I'm not thrilled with limiting the materials on the signs. I think composite should probably be included because it's easily cleaned, it stands up. And yeah, you heard me at the HRB meeting.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the last one. So these would be things that the HRB would review. So maybe Sean, just wait on the poll and we'll let people look at the pictures a little longer this time. Sorry for that last time. I probably asked Sean to put the poll on too soon. So these, if the project is not exempt and it's not on the list of items that staff can approve, then it would be reviewed by the HRB. So the result, these are the things that we think would end up being reviewed by the HRB. So when we ask you in the poll, you can tell us, yes, I think this should be reviewed by the HRB. And if you don't think so, then don't select that. And we would assume that should be something maybe reviewed by staff instead. So we have new street furniture, streetscape designs that have not already been approved. So like different bench materials, potentially, that's why the bench is there. A new street segment. So just picture where there isn't a through street in McLoughlin. We want to add a new street. We think that should go to HRB. Significant grading work that's done by the city, if at all. Retaining walls or fences that don't meet HRB policies. So if the city were putting a chain link fence anywhere in the district, we go to HRB. Redevelopment of park sites. So that's the Latourette Park, groundbreaking. Let's see, murals in the historic district, or on historic building, on city murals. Right-of-way vacations, when the city vacates the right-of-way and gives it over to a private party. In Kenema, we're proposing that any new driveways or changes to existing driveway approaches would go to the HRB. And then any new stormwater detention ponds, if that were ever to be, those are usually taken on by the city and maintained by the city. So that would be a public project, and we're proposing that would have to go to the HRB as well. So let's put the poll up, Sean, please.
I know some people have stormwater detention ponds in their basements.
Would murals include art and sculptures?
We can add, if it should, we can add that, but right now I don't think that was meant to be included.
Okay, I would
All
think
the art
about-
on 7th Street was reviewed, Rocky.
Right, right. So I would
Because
think
it was a
sculptures-
package.
Sculptures would be part, and monuments would be part
Yeah.
of that too, I would think, hopefully.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to have any stormwater detention ponds in McLaughlin.
And so just to just to repeat, if you are voting, if you're selecting it, then that means that you agree it should go to the HRB. If you're not selecting it, then we're going to assume that you mean that that's maybe more, that you think staff could review that, and it doesn't raise to the level of HRB review.
Did you have something else that you wanted to add to that, Rocky?
I don't, oh, no. You mean I should put my hand down?
Yeah, just didn't want to skip over you. Karen, what would you like to add?
Oh, just chuckling at Denise's comment. Both Kanema and McLaughlin neighborhoods have multiple creeks running underneath. And yes, it's not unusual for your basement to be a stormwater detention pond.
Kelly, when you talked about landscaping, I think one of the things that, my favorite landscaping material is arborvitae. And I would have to say, if somebody wanted to put up a landscaping thing of all arborvitae, I would strongly have to object to that, because that's not even a natural material. It's not even a material. And it's just, well, it's just a hideous plant.
Let's include laurel hedges too.
Yes, let's throw laurel hedges in there.
Oh,
Well, I think on the last slide, we had new landscaping installations listed on the staff review.
no laurel hedges.
So it would still, any landscaping would still come to staff or me right now. And then I would have the ability to say, that arborvitae row isn't really, maybe you should rethink that, Public Works or Parks or whoever's proposing it. But again, we're only talking about public installations right now and not what somebody might do on their private property.
I probably better not say anything, because next thing I'll know, John Lewis will drop an arborvitae plant on my front porch.
All right. Is there anybody else who's working on the poll still?
Okay, so it looks like generally we had a lot of agreement over having these go to HRB. People weren't really sure about storm ponds, driveways in Kanema, murals. Any thoughts before we end the conversation? Any thoughts about these, like, you think murals should be allowed outright or by staff, or any reason why you said no? Karen?
I just
Should be reviewed by HRB.
Yes, well, at some point, we have multiple codes that address a lot of the things we're talking about tonight. Where and when do we decide that the McLoughlin Conservation District and Kanema Historic District get different rules than the rest of the city? We are doing a wonderful job on code for trees, stormwater, you name it. There really needs to be some line where we decide that the Historic Review Board can weigh in on something versus what the city's already created in code. And
Okay. Oh, you said end, sorry. Got it. All right, I don't see any other hands raised, so I am going to, let's see, I took us out of the PowerPoint, didn't I? So we thank you very much. This is really great feedback to get on our recommendation or on our alternatives. And we'll take this and do some more work, and then we will next be, well, we have the open house online through the end of February. And then I think we will be taking this to the HRB in March, most likely, at a work session, and the City Commission either March or April as well. Once we have the results of the online open house, and we we can have some kind of draft recommendations. So please email me if you have any questions or comments. Please on the website, take the online open house if you want to give more commentary, and share it with your neighbors as well, and your colleagues and friends. Sean, anything you want to add?
I would add, I have one more poll. Sorry to poll fatigue everyone, but it is what should have gone first, which is just your general connections to the historic districts themselves. And then I promise not to personally ask you via poll a question.
Oh, I thought it was, did we like you, Sean?
you have to send me personal emails to tell me.
Okay,
that,
I'll send you a personal email.
No, this is just to get so we have kind of statistics on who participated. So thanks for filling this out. And I also want to mention that Sean has done a fantastic job, and I'm really, really happy to have him work on this project. And the only reason that we're able to have Sean is that we have the Certified Local Government Grant, and it funds his work. So I want to acknowledge that we wouldn't be able to do nearly this level of public engagement without that grant funding and without Sean. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Of course. And I would add to that too, that I do have enough hours left in my contract that if there's anybody who is feeling more confused than anything after all of this, that I'm still happy to have a phone conversation or a brief Zoom session with you so that we can work through and I can get some opinions from you.
Okay, well, I'll have to take you on the tour, but we'll have to be in separate cars.
I would like that.
This survey says it's multiple choice and you can pick more than one, but you cannot pick more than one. It only allows you to pick one.
Oh no, that was my fault. Let me see if I can edit it real quick.
Yeah, I wanted to check two and I couldn't check two. Thank you, Ron.
That's an important consideration. Let me try this again.
Is that your
By the way,
dog there, Wendy?
Kelly and Sean, sorry for
Taking
being
the
late.
poll?
I came straight from another meeting.
It's a busy night tonight.
Well, I fudged that one, and unfortunately I can't edit the poll because I'm not logged into the Oregon City Zoom account.
Oh gosh.
So I don't know what the easiest way to do this is, whether people want to put it in the chat real
edit
quick. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, everyone.
Oh geez. It's asking me to add a poll. Oh man. Well,
John,
maybe
you already
Ron,
have-
just choose your favorite answer.
Sean, you already have plenty of feedback from me already, but I might take up some more of your hours in the next few days since I was late.
No problem.
All right, I'm not able to edit the poll right now, so Ron, just choose your favorite one.
Is the poll gonna come back up again? Oh, there it is. Thank you. Oh,
I can put it back. I'm sorry.
yeah.
If I put it back up, everyone's going to have to do this one more time. You just going to mean that it's not going to be incredibly helpful, but the one that is most significant to you at least. And I
That's what I did.
apologize. It's still a learning experience in the Zoom land, despite being a year into this process.
I think this is the city's first virtual open house too. I don't think I think we've had lots of virtual meetings, but we've not actually held a virtual open house. So thanks for being our guinea pigs.
And honestly, thank you for the feedback, because yeah, some of these poll questions were difficult to formulate to begin with. So